grab a cup of coffee if you would, because we're going to go on a journey. We're going to go on an experience. So here we go. We embarked on a journey that was going to last the better part of 4 weeks. It was a pretty significant journey. It was going to require multiple flights, some of those flights as many as 15 hours. It was going to include journeys on trains, uh, even in a tuk-tuk, which is like a two-wheeled cart and that might be pulled by a man, might be pulled by a motorcycle, could potentially be pulled by a horse. Kind of depends on where you're at in the world. But we're on this journey. We would be in taxis. We would be in buses. It was going to be a full month of travel, a full month of journey. I had a team with me, as I normally do on these journeys. I had a seasoned pastor with me who actually had a military background. So he had a lot of experience with cross-cultural kind of situations and so forth. So it was together with him that I was leading a group of teenagers. And we were on this journey. And together we were experiencing and touching things like never before. And today I want to tell you the story of a young man that was on that team, a young man that was on this journey with me, a young man who was, I would say he was probably 18 years old because he had just graduated from high school. So he was right at that age and he was preparing to go into college. And he was on this journey. He was on this trip with me, and we're navigating and we're experiencing and we're touching things. We're eating foods that, were unfamiliar and unknown. We were in lands where there were customs and there were cultures, um, things that again were unfamiliar to us. Not to mention the fact that we were just traveling extensively and just the ins and outs of that. I mean, if you've never been on a flight that literally lasts 15 hours from takeoff to landing, that is an experience, to be on a plane that long. And there's just so many pieces and parts that were new and unusual. And I watched this young man. Today's a story of heart change because I watched this young man and I realized he was from a rural. Sometimes I'm hesitant with details, but I can tell you certainly this detail. Sometimes I don't want to violate people's trust or confidence, and sometimes their safety. That's why I sometimes don't tell some specific details. But this young man was from a rural town in Minnesota, and I know I don't say that right. If you're from Minnesota, I know you say it correctly, and I don't, even when I tried there. So here I'm watching this young man as we're traveling, and we're in foreign lands, foreign culture, foreign customs, and foreign foods, and we're traveling and we're doing things that were new and unfamiliar and different for us. And I'm watching this young man, and I'm watching the impact that seemed to be happening on his heart. At one point on this journey, one of the jobs we did was a very difficult one in that we were doing a building project. And it was very hot and humid, and we were in an area with lots of poverty. And I watched him observe this. I watched this young man as he played with the children. After a day's work, we would then often have the opportunity to play ball or even do artwork or simple games with children in the area. And I watched him do this, and I watched him interact. I watched him talk to people. And I knew that he was experiencing a lot that he hadn't before. And I could tell he was taking it in. I there's a look, and I've done so many short-term mission trips that I've worked with lots of teams, and I've gotten to know, you can just watch people and you can tell, oh well, here's where they are on that spectrum as far as how deeply this is impacting them. And I watched this young man and I'm like, wow, you are taking this in. You are really absorbing this. You're watching, you're participating. He wasn't asking many questions or having a lot of conversation about it, but there was just, I could tell he was taking it in. And it was fascinating to watch. And for me, as a leader, that certainly is part of what I'm looking for. I want these journeys, these experiences, these trips to make a difference in hearts, because otherwise, what's the point? And that certainly is those that in country that we're ministering to, and in this particular trip, on this particular situation, we definitely we could tell, what we were doing, this project we were doing, this building that we were helping put up, was something they desperately needed, and we're going to have a difficult time doing on their own. I think it was very eye-opening for this young man to experience, even like we paid, not only did we come and do labor, but we paid for some of the bricks that we were using to build. And we paid for sand, that was needed for that process. And I think that even was very eye-opening to him. Here in the United States, we just, we get a loan, or people already have the money, and we buy the materials and we hire labor and we build. Right? It's really, and I know it's not that simple for all of us here in the US. I get that, but it is very simple compared to what we were experiencing there, to where they likely would not have what they needed without help. And we were there helping. And I think that was impacting this young man's heart and life. He was seeing that, oh wow, what we're bringing here, what we're doing is making a difference. It's helping them do something and have something that they really needed. And it was a genuine need. We were building a kitchen on this orphanage. They needed that kitchen. These kids were being cared for, and food's a big part of that. And they needed that, right? So it wasn't just, oh, they needed a new kitchen, or they wanted a new kitchen. No, they needed this. They've been cooking in a little shack that just was a nothing, right? And here they are, getting a more proper new kitchen, and we were helping do that. And I watched this young man. I watched as his heart was certainly being impacted. And our trip continued. I mentioned it was a long trip, so we had a lot of time to experience a lot, to take a lot in. And I watched him as we were driving, even, and watching him observe things. I watched him talk to people. And we even, we had moments, as we do with all of our adventures in the mission world. We take time to also enjoy some fun activities, to experience culture in ways that, when there's sights to see and so forth, we'll take some time and do some of those things. And even as we moved, kind of often we'll do more of that, like towards the end of the trip. And as we kind of, excuse me, as we moved into that phase, I could tell that the weeks that we had traveled already, this young man had taken a lot in, and he was still processing. And even as we were playing, sightseeing, that process continued. And I enjoyed the journey with him. And the trip ended. We arrived back in the United States, and we went to our respective homes, and we settled back into life. And for me, that was a normal process. That was something I did on a regular basis. I would go on these journeys, go on these trips, and come home. And sometimes it would take me more processing and considering as to what I had experienced, what I had seen, how my life had been touched. Sometimes it was easier or less involved. Sometimes I just had so much to dive back into that maybe I didn't even properly debrief it, at times. So I knew that process. I knew that process of coming home. And I always try to prepare my teams, but when you've not done this before, you've not experienced it, sometimes it's difficult to know how to do this process of coming home, this debrief, this taking all that we've journeyed, all the experience, and sometimes they're very deep and impactful things. And for this particular young man I've been talking to you about, I could tell it was a lot of heart impact on this trip, which is so very cool. But he got home. Remember, I mentioned that he had graduated high school, so he was in that summer where he's leaving high school and going into college. So a lot of transition there anyway. And this young man was doing this process of coming back home, this process of debriefing this amazing month-long experience in a foreign land, foreign culture, so much foreign, and the experience of helping people that needed help like he had never seen before. And he comes home and he's processing that, but it's off to college, and it's off to the experience of that change. And I mean, for most of you, whether it didn't have to be college, but for many of you, you're either coming up to this or you've done this process of becoming an adult, essentially, right? In whatever way that looks like for you. You get out of high school and you go to work, you go to college, you do whatever you do, but you learn to be an adult. And so this young man was in that phase. And it was a year or two later that I received a phone call. And it surprised me because it was a year or two later. And I received this phone call from this young man's mother. And she said, "Can we just talk a minute?" And I said, "Of course we can. What's going on?" And she said, "Well, my son's really having a bit of a challenging time. He's in college now, and he's really pondering and considering what he's doing with his life, and he keeps going back to that experience, that journey, that travel that you took him on. And it's not bad, but it deeply touched him, and he's not sure what to do with it." And she started going through and describing the things that her son was expressing to her and the things that he was experiencing. We're talking a year or two later. She unpacks it, and I could hear, as any mother that cares about her son would be, I could hear angst in her voice. And at some point, as she was sharing, I said, just for a moment, just pause. Just for a moment, just pause. I want to tell you that what you're describing to me, that your son's going through, the experience, which I would call it the debrief of this mission adventure, and how it deeply touched his heart to see things he had never seen and to be a blessing in a way he probably had never been before. He's processing that, and it's all normal. And on the other end of the phone, I could just hear a sigh of relief. And I said, "I want you to continue to share with me, but I want you to know that this process is good for him. It's healthy, and it's just part of the journey. He's going to be a better man for it, and he'll get through the parts that even seem a bit challenging." On the other end of the phone, this mother, I could just hear that relief. I said, "So continue sharing." And she shared a little more, and I had thoughts and ideas and suggestions, because sometimes this journey of life in general, but this journey of a mission trip and journey of culture and journey of travel and journey of helping people can impact you deeply. And in doing so, if you're serious about it and you want to grow and learn, you want to take it in, it takes some time to sort it all, to process it. And there's amazing lessons in there. There's a lot to respect and a lot to honor in that process. And it's worth going through that process. So this is what this young man was doing. And I saw it in him on the trip. I saw him taking it in. And even these several years later, and in fact, I'm going to take you out just a little bit further. I received a letter from this young man. Yeah, that was back in the day when we wrote letters. So this goes back a little ways. But I received a letter from this young man. He had graduated from college and was embarking on his career. And this letter was just one of thank you. Thank you for taking me on that journey. Thank you for talking to my mom. Thank you for having ideas and encouraging me on how to process and sort and learn the lessons that I was faced with learning. It was a great experience. It was a great experience for me to know that this young man, as I watched him on this trip, was taking it in. And he was experiencing change. And these many years later, he was applying those lessons. So listen, I don't know for you. For me, there's so many things in there. Like, I'm so thankful that I did what I needed to make that trip happen for him. It's not easy sometimes to do the things in life that are rich and deep and powerful. It's not always easy, to do the things that are going to impact people. But it's so worth it. It is so worth it. It just warms my heart even telling you this story right now, that young man was so impacted. And I'm so glad I did my part in that happening. I'm so glad he was impacted. So for you, hearing the story, I hope that you can find a point of application. Maybe there's something in your life that you should process deeper and take in and learn the lessons from, or maybe there's ways you know that you could impact people and you want to dig in deeper and do that. I don't know what the lesson might be. My prayer is that there's a lesson in there for you. That's the point of Catalyst Chronicles. What's the catalyst of change, of growth, of maturing in you? For me, these stories have done that for me and continue to do that for me. And I'm so grateful for that. So thank you for listening. And I pray that you and the Holy Spirit will go forward with this thought, this idea, this story, and find that point of catalyst in your life for growth and change and maturing and learning and just all the great things that come into our lives is if we take the time to let them. So maybe as this young man did, you'll take the time to let the journey in, let the story in, and let the change, let the lessons happen, let the change happen. Man, I just wish you all the best. God bless you. Thank you for watching. It's fun to tell these stories, and it's nice to know people are watching. Thank you for doing that. Until next time.